So today we're with Henry Blunt, who's one of my ex-colleagues, believe it or not. Now, Henry used to head up Retiring IFA on the acquisition side of things. Now, Henry's moved over about 2.5 years ago over to Wren Sterling and is their acquisitions director there. Since being there, Wren have done loads of acquisitions. They've done 23 in all. 8 of those were before Henry actually joined, but 6 of them he actually brokered with the business as well. The company has grown, so the profits have doubled in that time, and the funds under management has increased from 5 billion to 8 billion. So has had basically a really big impact on things, and we're just going to get in and try and get from him his wealth of knowledge about the M&A sector and what you can do as well to get your business ready for sale as well. Hen, thank you for joining me.
No pressure then.
Yeah, no pressure at all. How are things?
Good, thanks, Jay. Yeah, busy. It's been a really interesting journey. Obviously, as you said, we used to work together at a small family-owned business, and moving into the, how many people do we have there? 15, and
something like that. Yeah.
Moved to Wren Sterling where we've got 350 odd. It's just a different ball game. Gone from family-owned company to very much a corporate private equity-backed business. It's quite a change.
How's the transition been from from such a small company to a larger business?
I think how's the transition been? I've really enjoyed it. There's been some different challenges. Well, there's challenges at working at Retiring IFA, as you'll be aware.
Yeah.
And I think with Wren Sterling, the difference is, when you're in a small family-owned business, you can be really agile. You can just almost make a decision and act on it in that day. With a corporate structure, you've just got to spend some more time making sure that everyone's briefed, producing a straw man, doing an in-depth PowerPoint, a slide deck to get sort of various approvals. But I think in terms of the quality of decision-making and the ability to actually make the right decisions, you end up trialing less things and actually just focusing on the big wins, and everything you tend to roll out seems to actually have a significant impact and work. So there's pros and cons.
Yeah, no, I can get that. I mean, I've got to admit, from my own experience, I haven't actually had any experience of working for a proper corporate business, bar a pub when I was when I was about 18. But that's about it really. So just tell me, I obviously know the story well, but how did you get into the profession?
Initially, as with a lot of people in the profession, you do a degree that's obviously completely related to what you get into. So I picked biology, naturally, because I found that the tangible value that you could bring by knowing the Latin name for a fruit fly was obviously just intrinsically linked to financial services.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yes.
So
I did a degree that was completely unrelated. How I actually got into it in the first place is my old man was worked for one of the largest financial services business in the UK. He worked his way up from sort of the bottom to one of the directors. So we always, I guess, had a financial services family, if you like.
Yeah.
Financial services as a topic of conversation was always on the table. And he'd previously worked with Retiring IFA, or the recruitment element of that, which is where you were way back when.
Yes.
When you were young and beautiful.
Yeah.
But he worked with Steve and Emma, his wife at the time, who basically placed a lot of recruits with my dad. And he said, you should go and have a conversation with Steve, do a couple of summer placements there for free, just because the guy's got a hell of a lot of knowledge. He knows what he's talking about. They run a really sterling business. And I basically worked for free for Steve for a couple of summers and became the top salesperson there on Retiring IFA. And the rest, they say, is history.
Why, just out of interest then, and so what was the reason for joining Wren Sterling when you joined there?
So I've been at Retiring IFA for 8 years. I'd done 146 deals, so it was a busy 8 years. And when you start off in that sort of brokering space, Steve sort of to get you up to speed, he gave you a script, and you learnt the script, and you learnt, kind of understood the profession. And after 8 years of having these same conversations with the same types of people, you end up almost becoming a script yourself, because what you have to say to elicit the greatest probability of success in terms of getting a deal across the line. You know what you have to say in the first conversation, the second conversation, you know. And I think because also it was a small company, after 8 years, you probably glean 80 to 90% of the available information and the expertise of the people in the business. And for me, what I ended up doing was working on more and more complicated deals because I found them intellectually stimulating.
Yep.
But on the basis a lot of your earnings are made from commissions of actually doing deals, I found myself doing less and less deals on the basis that the easy deals to do, the ones that would elicit you earning a decent living, were boring, and the complicated ones, which would take years to do or sometimes never come off because they were too difficult, were really interesting. So I was actually hurting my earnings seeking sort of an intellectually stimulating work life. So for me, it then came the time to go, well, actually, what else is out there? And I'd worked with Wren Sterling on 6 of the 8 deals that they'd done, and got to know Ian Darby, the chairman, Ian Halley, the CEO at the time, and just really, really liked them as people, but also realised there's a whole wealth of knowledge and expertise, and taking the deal through from not just from start, from first meeting to completing the deal, but actually then delving into the integration process and how all that works and debt raises, etc. It was all that world that I wanted to find out more about and learn about.
It's I think you kind of skirted over one bit that just like to explore with you, which is the more interesting complex deals. I mean, I think anyway that when you were there, you were the one that basically took on the role of getting on these more complicated deals. What makes them more complicated? What is it? Was it the size of the deal? What is it that you found interesting about that?
Yeah, I guess it was a variety of factors. If you had a significant number of shareholders all pulling in different directions with different views of what they wanted an exit to look like or not an exit, people wanting to do equity swaps as opposed to just having cash. I mean, I guess when Retiring IFA started, it was very much moving from recruitment to selling small self-employed advisors books as they were retiring. And where I took it to was dealing with sort of multinational corporations spearheading acquisition strategies of people coming into the UK. So you were dealing with holding companies in different jurisdictions. You were dealing with just bigger businesses, which meant more complications in terms of just historic legacy, complications with systems, and there were more things you had to match versus just finding someone a place that he could sell his clients. You had to look at more in depth into things like trooping over all the existing staff, and it was just more of everything. And bigger businesses, you were then also having to figure out how to get them the cash in order to actually do some of the deals, as opposed to just someone that could purchase it from cash flow, and people were looking at different valuation metrics because they themselves were valued differently to just a retiring individual, which tended to be valued on a multiple of recurring income. So it was just more complex on lots of different levels. I guess probably the more intellectually stimulating ones where I found myself burning a lot of time was when it wasn't just your standard financial planning business, and it also had a corporate finance business they wanted to sell. They also had a large protection and mortgage business, or it was a network that was looking to sell. It was something that was just slightly different and from the standard that we've been working with.
And just going, you touched on there on an interesting point that I think I sent over and we spoke about briefly beforehand, which is the multiple of the recurring revenue side of things. So you've got two basic ways of doing this. You've got the multiple of the recurring revenue and then EBITDA. Just out of interest, when you're looking at businesses at the moment, when do you decide, do you know what, EBITDA kicks in here, or is it a multiple of recurring revenue?
I think the days of businesses being valued on a multiple of recurring revenue have gone, unless it's just a small self-employed business selling to a small local regional firm, and they're doing a cash flow. They're doing the deal out of cash flow. When I joined Wren Sterling, which was November 21, there was a massive influx of private equity into the space. So I think the market went from something like 3 or 4 PE-backed firms to 32, and private equity firms are all valued on a multiple of EBITDA. So if you're valued on a multiple of EBITDA, you value what you're buying on the same sort of metric. So I don't really see, although IFAs always want the valuation given to them as a multiple of recurring income because it's something they understand, it's transparent, you then don't have an argument over costs in the share purchase agreement or the asset purchase agreement. But pretty much every deal now, every deal that we look at EBITDA because that's really the true value of what the business, that's what the business is worth.
I guess that this is a nature of the beast though as well, because Wren Sterling are probably looking at fairly sizable acquisitions now. So
small and large.
Small. Yeah. So the regional side of things, if you still get, you might have the odd one, I'm assuming, where if it's a self-employed IFA and he wants to sell up, then you might do it as a multiple of recurring income.
We'd still look at it as a multiple of EBITDA. Again, we present it as a multiple of recurring. Yeah, because it's, if a lot of people come to the market and they say, I want 4 times recurring income, I want 5 times recurring income, but that's all very well and good. But if that business has 500 grand of cost and someone else is looking for, let's say 2 businesses, they've both got £1 million turnover, and let's say 750 of that is recurring income, but one of them's got a cost base of 250,000 and one of them's got a cost base of 700,000. You can't give, they're not both 4 times recurring income, and that's what vendors don't tend to understand. What you need to focus on is, what is actually the profitability of the firm? What will the profitability of that firm be in the new world, in our world, in my world? And that's what we then place a multiple attached to.
Okay, so, and then just so I can understand it, because I don't know anywhere near as much about this than you, as you, but how do you actually decide what constitutes cost? Because there must be elements like you'll have the element where maybe the advisor is working within the business and then they'll maybe be retiring and they'll be saying, well, you can take that cost out. And you'll say, well, actually, we've got to go and employ somebody to take over from you. How? Just explain to me in terms of the cost side of things.
We look at it in probably quite a simplistic way, which is ultimately all personal costs that someone puts through a business. They put through maybe a spouse, but the spouse doesn't actually work in the business. Or there'll be a client meeting in Barbados, which is actually just their holiday that they've somehow managed to get away with for many moons. Or they've got 17 mobile phones, children's laptops, multiple cars. You take out all that stuff that's just the costs that people put through by having an owner managed business. And then what we'd look at is what's their professional indemnity cost, what's their PI cost, and we'd replace that with our cost of PI on the basis that because we've got scale, ours will be cheaper, so there'll be a saving there. We'll look at the same sort of thing with the FCA fees, the FSCS levy, etc. But really, and I think this is the bit where people sort of almost fail to understand. If they spend £3,000 on stationery a year, we're going to keep in a cost of £3,000 on stationery because we'll still need to spend £3,000 on stationery in order to carry on offering the same service or an equal, offer a service with an equilibrium to those clients, if that makes sense.
You guys are obviously pretty big now, and you've got a bit of power around you. So there will be places where, for instance, I'm guessing there might be redundancies made. Are there redundancies made or anything?
So
like that?
I mean, yes, I mean our model has always been, and this is one of the reasons why I really liked to join Wren Sterling in the first place, is because it's a very people-focused business. So although we're PE backed, a lot of PE backed firms, they look at cost synergies. Yep. What they tend to mean by that is firing everyone. They just want to take on the assets. They hoover up the assets and stick it into their model. We're really focused on actually the organic growth of the business that we're buying. So in order to maintain organic growth, you need the people. So there might be a potential cost synergy in fact that, let's say they've got an office manager, but actually it's coming into one of our existing offices, or they've got a compliance director, but we already have a compliance director and department, or they've got a finance director. That being said, we'll always you always want to upgrade your team. So if they've got a really good compliance director, I tend to put them on a fixed term contract for a period of time, and so they have the opportunity to find themselves a new role if they wanted to, but we have the opportunity to look at them, see how they perform, how good are they better than someone in our current team, in which place you'd look to bring them in. So to answer your question, there are definitely economies of scale, but I think the thing that people forget is when you sort of when you head up different tiers of size, you end up having to do other things. So there's like a gender pay gap reporting. There's different level. You have to, especially in HR and finance. All of a sudden, you've got to do another level of reporting, which means you need more people. And people seem to forget that, you know, yes, they've got, I don't know, they outsource their compliance to 360, and we also use 360. We've got our internal compliance department, but you can't continually take on, and you couldn't take on another 8 billion of assets and expect to run it with your existing finance and compliance team. And at some point, there's that little hike. So we still need to put a cost in associated with that increase, associated with actually running that business, even if that cost doesn't necessarily happen or occur at that particular time, because otherwise what's going to happen is we're buying at almost an unrealistic value, if that makes sense.
No, it makes absolute sense. I think, as you say, I think otherwise what's going to happen is that you could take these little hits here and there, but the reality is that if you do this a lot, then
all of a sudden you've got to stick in £1 million of cost. And where's that come from? You know, so there are definitely. I think the major economies of scale for us is there's a PI saving. Anything where, you know, the cost is associated with a percentage of turnover, we will always have it slightly cheaper because of scale. You know, and the other, I guess, the other element is when you're vertically integrated in some respects, you can get a revenue synergy that otherwise doesn't exist, you know, in smaller firms. Like for us, we've got our own DFM, which sits on our centralised investment proposition and competes for position. But also it means that if someone utilises our DFM, you charge 20 basis points, you know, for that additional service. Well, if you're bringing in another 5 billion under management and they don't have a discretionary service, or they're offering a DFM, an outsourced DFM service, and ours is cheaper, performs better, and is a better fit for the client, then there's an opportunity there to get more revenue or sweat the assets that little bit more, and that's kind of the big opportunity that most people are looking at.
Do you ever get it the other way, where maybe someone has, let's just say that it's an old school IFA, and they've maybe been, they're running basically a skeleton business, and they've not taken on the costs that maybe they should do. Mm-hmm. Let's say they're not putting much into compliance or whatever. Do you ever have it the other way, where you have to say, well, actually, you've been neglecting this side of things. Actually, we're going to have to put some extra costs in here.
Oh yeah, a lot. More than you'd think, which does make it quite difficult to buy some businesses.
Yep.
Because they've got, especially when they've been maybe misled by a broker who just wants to sell the business, and the broker says, "Oh, your EBITDA, we've calculated your EBITDA as 300,000." Then they bring it to the market, and they bring it to ourselves or one of the other, you know, larger consolidators around, and we have to put in another £100,000 of cost. That's quite a sizable dent, especially in a smaller business. But that does happen all too frequently, because they're not, I think, especially with the smaller businesses, they're able to be, because they've got such good, strong client relationships, they might skirt around some of the regulatory stuff that they have to do. I'm not saying that they're not abiding by the rules, but they can be a bit more nimble. Like, for example, with consumer duty, you have to demonstrate fair value, you have to record everything you've done, and a lot of them just rely on the fact they've got fantastic client relationships, they know their clients won't complain, they've made their clients loads of money, the clients are really happy. And actually, you need to do more than that in a bigger business, because we're more closely monitored, and we've got to keep, you know, a handle on everything.
So just going on to what business owners can really do to get their business ready for sale. Let's just put you in the scenario and say that you've got your own IFA business now, and you're getting ready to sell. What would you do to get it ready to go? Let's say that you're going to sell in 2-3 years' time, something like that.
I would have started earlier. Okay. Start. So I think where most people go wrong is that they think getting ready for sale is just having the emotional conversation and readying themselves rather than actually readying their business. I think it's important to gather a team of trusted experts who are specialists in the space that can actually help you prepare the business for sale. One of the things, a little shout out to the Flower Group, Gordon Flower and Andy Wilkie. So they operate a service, sort of an outsourced FD service, and what they'll do is, they're not a broker, so they're not trying to sell a business, but they'll go into a business and they'll actually help them prepare it for sale in terms of analysing, you know, the underlying recurring income, analysing the turnover, analysing the client bank, and actually getting the service proposition all properly lined up, making sure people, they'll create a repository room for people, and they'll fill the repository room with all the necessary documentation that one would expect to actually ask for in due diligence. So you end up with sort of a ready-made data room, if you like, but also the quality of business that comes to you is a business that actually understands its underlying data. Most businesses don't actually have an idea about, which clients have what money, where the money is, what their net asset flows are, what their gross asset flows are. They just don't know the answers to it, because all they're doing as a small business is going, do I have enough money to pay the staff each month? Yes. Do I have surplus that I can spend for myself? Yes. And they don't really delve into much more detail than just what comes into the bank account. So I think spending some time and actually packaging up the business in the right way, getting some decent analysis done of where the assets are held, which clients have what, making sure that you've got all your employees or self-employed, you have contracts in place for them all, and they're stored in a data room, because that's always a nightmare. You've got a simple corporate structure. So we've acquired businesses before where they have 3 directly authorised businesses, and actually what you really want to acquire is 1 directly authorised business. And that firm, they did some sub 15 applications. They moved the assets from 2 of the directly authorised businesses to the one that we eventually bought with the FCA's approval. But the better thing to do would have been to have done that a couple of years before you actually came to the market. So you're presenting, a simplistic business, because the more simple it is, the more straightforward it is, the more transparent it is, the more people will pay. I think the other piece is, if I was preparing my business for sale, I'd also increase the recurring revenue. I'd increase the ongoing advisor charge. A lot of businesses that come to us charge 50 basis points, 75 basis points. You might as well increase it yourself and then sell the business, because you'll get more money for it.
It's an interesting. I was actually going to ask about that, because I think I'll go. So I was going to ask about the old-fashioned businesses, because I think sometimes, and I don't know I'd be interested to see what you think about this, but I think that the old-fashioned businesses, sometimes they're an absolute pain. Like, let's say that they're not paperless or something like that, which it's getting rarer now, but it did, 10 years ago, this was happening it was a fairly commonplace, really, particularly when RDR was around
100%.
as well. So that happened a lot. If that's the case, and someone's got a bit of an older style business, there is probably, I would argue that there's probably more value for you guys in that, even though there's a lot of pain and initially a lot of admin to do on that. Not worth it.
It's not worth it anymore, no, because of all the new regulations, and because of things like consumer duty, etc. And we'd much rather have a business that has that's you'd rather something that's more aligned to you. So because it's a lot less work and it's a lot less potential unknown cost that you have to shove into it.
Yep.
So we'd much rather have a firm that was already charging closer to 1%, even though you're going to end up paying more for it because the profitability is going to be higher. We'd much rather pay more for something that's more aligned to us, more similar to us. It's a similar sort of thing with, if it's paperless, you'd much rather buy a paperless business than you would one with paper. Yes, there might be some golden nuggets in it, but it's very difficult to attribute a tangible price tag to the unknown. And we'd rather, I've had it countless times where people come to me saying, look, I haven't really seen these clients for a while, so there's probably going to be a lot of new money there. It's like, well, if there was a lot of new money there, you should go out there and get it yourself and prove that it's there. And also, if you haven't seen the clients for a while, that's not a great thing. So we'd much rather people had, a paperless business, one that was more aligned to us, one with a proper back office system in place. My pet hate is when someone says they've got a bespoke back office system, which is Excel spreadsheets and filing cabinets. It's basically all it is all the time. But I think they're more trouble than they're worth, and actually we'd much rather spend more money and pay more money in terms of a multiple on a higher EBITDA, underlying EBITDA figure, and get a better quality firm every time.
When the transition happens with Wren Sterling, does so you charge 1%, do you, on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, 1%'s our standard charge. Yeah.
Okay.
If you've got someone that's got many millions, I'm sure that not everyone in the company is paying 1%.
So let's say that somebody was to move their business over. Now, I don't know who you guys deal with exactly, but you must have a lot of monies with certain providers.
All of them.
Do you do you get the benefits of, do you get a better deal with them, which
Yeah.
allows you to be able to incorporate that cost so the total expense ratio doesn't go up for the client? Or maybe it will go up, I don't know.
So what I tend to do when we're looking at a business, we as part of our deal, one of our valuation creation levers in the deal is I say, look, if you can uplift your ongoing advisor charge, that's something that we're happy to pay, a multiple times that uplift. But the condition is that it's got to be fair value for the client. Now, we can demonstrate it's fair value because we offer underneath our service proposition fair value whilst charging the client 1%.
Yep.
But what you don't want to do is have a new client join you, move over to your service proposition, up their ongoing charge, and they're not getting, in their eyes, it's easier to offer them. They will get more value from the service proposition because our service proposition has more breadth and depth to it because we're a bigger company. We've been able to invest more into it. But to your point, it's the easiest way to get them to uplift their financial planning charge is if you can also say, look, the rates that we have with Aviva are, I won't share them, but are X, Y, and Z,
Yep.
which will be 10 basis points cheaper than what they currently have with a different provider, or let's say Aviva as well. At which point, you could increase the client fee by 10 basis points, so the client's no worse off, but you're getting actually again, you're sweating the assets, you're getting a slightly greater share. So that is something that we do quite a lot of.
And does that happen for most acquisitions that you do, would you say, on the
I'd
whole?
say most acquisitions, when we're looking at them, what I quite like to see is that they use a very expensive platform that's pretty clunky and hasn't been offering them a great service. Because we know with the platform deals that we've negotiated, they're at a better pricing point and they offer an enhanced level of service. So there's a significant benefit to the clients moving over to the platform agreements that we have. That being said, we don't force. I've always been about keeping continuity. So I'd actually much rather the client stays where they are on the platform and they remain with the business than they migrate over. But we're not vertically integrated from a platform piece, so there's no benefit to us. Really, the benefit is hopefully something that the client and the advisor will feel, and could potentially increase the ongoing advisor charge a little bit.
So when somebody comes into the business, you were talking there about continuity. What exactly do you do to make sure that continuity is kept exactly? Because there are obviously going to be changes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there absolutely are going to be changes, and there's always some red lines. Like we use Intelligent Office as a back office system. Someone has to come onto our Intelligent Office back office system. They have to come underneath our compliance regime. We use a hive up model, so we'll basically get all the clients to sign up to new terms of business, which means that branding pretty much changes quite quickly.
Yeah.
Because from the FCA's perspective, the client needs to know who to complain to, and as the only regulated entity, once we've done a deal, it's now us. What I do, because of where we are in our life cycle, we're only 2 years, 8 months into our since we got backed by Lightyear, who are our New York-based private equity company that specialise in FS, who back us. Because we've still got time to be able to, before Lightyear decide to refinance, which will be a few years in the future, we've got time to take things slowly and do things properly, so we can still offer a lot of continuity. For example, what I tend to do is with a client service proposition, initially what we'll do is we'll look at their service proposition, we'll make sure it's Consumer Duty compliant, and we'll put our header and footer on it, and we'll run it through our compliance department, but we'll get the clients to sign up to what is ultimately their existing service agreement, but with a Wren Sterling header and footer, and then we'll build a plan with the clients over a 12-month period to migrate them over to our service proposition. So initially you keep continuity of the service proposition and charging, which means that from a client's perspective, that yes, they're signing up to Wren Sterling, but it's the service level given to them in the same medium for the same price point that they've always known and loved. We'll keep them on the same platform unless the advisor thinks that there's a better opportunity at one of the platform agreements that we currently have. They can stay in the same investment proposition in general. The only one that if they run their own advisory MPS, what we tend to do is we say, look, you can keep that for up to 12 months, so a full review cycle. But really, we'd want to move it to anything else on our centralised investment proposition. And our centralised investment proposition has incredible breadth and depth. There isn't a house view on active, passive, or blended. It's really got everything for someone to pick from. So it's a smorgasbord of whatever they think's right for the client. So I think that the fact that we cheapy over all the staff, the fact that we only really do deals where we're keeping the directors, so you're still keeping the the client's face-to-face contact point. For me, if you're keeping the ongoing advisor charge the same, platform the same, investment solution the same, they can keep the offices sometimes for a period depending on where they are. The people are staying the same. There's a lot of continuity. Really, you're just changing a lot of stuff behind the scenes that the client doesn't actually see, which I think is why it works pretty well.
It sounds. I think I like the fact that the continuity side of things is so. I mean, when I've spoken to IFAs that are looking to sell, I mean, continuity is probably the main thing. I would say. I mean, I think cash comes into it quite a lot as well, but that it's interesting actually when I always find it interesting to see when somebody goes and thinks to themselves continuity, if they can, whether the valuation can potentially go and turn them around and make them think, actually, do you know what, continuity, yeah, I'm happy to sort of put that to one side.
I'm happy to lose those deals.
Yeah.
So I think we tend to win. I think most of the deals that pretty much all the deals actually that we've won on the people aspect. So when we've had a conversation with them, we've told them about our acquisition strategy. They've gone, actually, that's the one for me because I get to stay around. I know my client's going to be looked after because I'm still going to be there looking after. We've got a nice slow transition to either a Wren Sterling advisor or another advisor within the firm. I think we can, within reason, structure something that's pretty bespoke, that is very much people and client focused rather than pound, shillings and pence focused. Now, we do back it up with, I'm pretty sure that we always offer within the top 5% of offers, but we'll never be, in most cases, we won't be the top offer on the basis that, we don't have a mandatory move of monies to our DFM or a mandatory move to a particular platform. We're not mandating certain revenue synergies, and we're not cutting a load of cost, as in firing a load of people. The people that cut a load of people out of the business and also say you have to move 150 million to our investment strategy, they're always going to be able to pay more. But that's the price you pay. For continuity, you ultimately you don't have to pay quite as much because you're going to retain the clients, and actually it's all about the people. And I think the way in which I've managed to compete with those deals is we've put in these valuation creation levers where we've basically said, look, it's vendor led. If you want to use our DFM, provided it's right for the client, there's a big bonus in there for you. If you want to uplift the ongoing advisor fees, provided that you can demonstrate greater value to the client, there's a big bonus in there for you. If you want to carry on growing the business and you keep doing a lot of organic growth, there's a big bonus in there for you. If you want some equity in Wren Sterling, that's going to be worth 2 to 3 times the initial buy-in, and it's got a coupon attached to it. There's another big growth bonus for you, and that's how I've been able to compete, where my baseline price has probably been a little bit less.
You said earlier on about the platforms and the clunky ones where you would. I
won't name names.
That's what I was going to ask. Okay, fine. And then
you know who you are.
I literally don't have any idea.
There's just some. I think that there's some of the platforms out there. Some of the platforms, they're newer. They've got some good underlying tech. They've got a lot of capacity and breadth of what they can offer, and some of them haven't advanced or changed in many moons, yet they're charging 35 basis points for the service. I think the interesting thing to come out of the platform world is you could run your own platform now. You can use the Hubwise or Hubwise, Moultrie, Seckle, whatever it might be. And I think there's going to be something else, which is the WealthLink piece. They're joined up to Intelligent Office, which is an interesting thing that we'll be looking at some point. But running your own platform, that's where there's going to be a nice bit of vertical integration on offer. For us, that's something that maybe the new private equity firm in the future might look at, but it's not something we're going to focus on because it's, we've just spent ages trying to negotiate really good rates with really good household names, so you end up with a great service that, if something goes wrong, it's on them, not something else on us, if that makes sense.
When a business comes to you, what do you really want to see? What makes you get really excited about a business? And then you'd call up Ian and go and say, "Oh, I've got this business. What? Yeah, we need to buy it right away."
It's a great question. I think that there's quite a few different things. I think One of the if I put my private equity hat on, the things that private equity are really looking for is it's not just inorganic growth through doing the acquisition, but it's the organic growth that that business can then bring to your core business. So if you buy a business that's writing £30 million of funds under management, yes, you've got the organic growth of the 300 million that you've bought, so the inorganic growth of the 300 million you've bought, but then tacked into your organic growth curve is their organic growth. So from a private equity piece, the key thing to differentiate yourself in the space is you want to do sort of 5 to 10%, organic growth net assets each year. That would be incredible. 5% sort of top of class. I think the likes of TP and stuff, they'll do closer to 10%. But if you can get anywhere 5% plus, so that's something that's very attractive. I think the other thing is obviously it's the synergies of the firm with your firm if you look at kind of like things like tech stack and stuff like that. So let's say they're on Intelligent Office, they use a similar ATR tool. They have proper systems and processes and operational procedures in place that mimic your own, and they do things in a similar way. If I put my hat on, for me it's all about the culture of the firm. So is it a financial planning firm first and foremost, which is what we are, as opposed to people that it's kind of like, how do you add value to your clients, or how do your clients feel like you add value to them? So our clients feel like we add value to them through a holistic financial planning operation. We take them through from start to finish through their journey, and we've got some clever things that we do in the background with the money, with the DFM, etc. But really the value that they see from us is the financial planning piece. Other people show their value to a client by not really the financial planning journey, not cash flow modelling, but it's we're going to put some money in China, we're going to put some money in Japan, and it's more about the underlying assets rather than actually the financial planning journey. That's quite a different mentality. So I always focus on the financial planning businesses. I think the other thing is, for me, it's, do I believe the story of the individual? That's always been my key thing. Do I like them? Because we don't want to work with people that we don't like, because we're going to be working with them for a long time. Do I believe what they're saying? Do they speak the right language? Is the first thing they ask me about the pounds that will pay them, or are they concerned about their clients and the journey their clients are going to go on, the journey their staff are going to go on? That for me is the key thing, because if they're concerned about all of that, I know that they're valuing the right principles. If they're concerned about the pounds, then we're probably not going to win, on the basis they could shift all their assets to someone else and they'll pay them a pretty penny more.
So basically, as you said, culture side of things, the main thing, and I think, the lifestyle planning side of things. So I'm assuming it's someone embracing cash flow modelling.
100%. If they're doing that, then usually they have a better file quality. I'm not saying that in every case, but if you're doing a full cash flow model and you're extracting a lot of information from your clients, you tend to have more information in the files. And then from a compliance perspective, if you've got a full fact find and you've got, if you know everything about your client, it's more likely that everything is provable, and you're doing a proper review each time, and that makes it a lot easier, and there's less problems we find down the line in terms of a shift to how we deal with clients, because we gather a lot of information, and if people haven't been doing that previously, then that's quite a learning curve, and it's quite different.
Do you look at the type of business and the type of client specifically? So I'm thinking here, just for example, so maybe if I've spoken to clients that have said that they like investment bonds, stuff like that.
Okay.
So maybe that's one area where they like, and then another side is a lot of clients will probably look at the ages of their clients as well. Is that something that you have a look at?
So we'll always do sort of a full analysis of someone's client bank. For me, I guess the major things that I'm looking at are we're trying to bring our general core business to a high quality private client business. So you're always trying to improve on your average portfolio size, as an average household portfolio size.
Yep.
It's better to deal with less larger clients than it is, in terms of our business model, it's better to deal with less larger clients than lots and lots of smaller clients, because it's the same level of work doing a financial review to someone that's got £10,000 as much as it is doing someone that's got £500,000. So we do look at
No, I was going to ask, is there sort of a sweet spot there? Because I would think that just my own assumption here is that if you've got, let's say that you acquire a business and there's 200 million in assets under management, but one of those clients has 100 million.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
Then
yeah.
you know, I'm just
That's risky. It's high risk.
Yeah. Is there a sweet spot in terms of the assets under management?
I've always tended to take the rule that if one client's got more than 10%, that's something I'm slightly concerned about.
Right.
But as long as the client doesn't have more than 10%, then and the bigger the business gets, that becomes less concerning. But I think sweet spot wise, you know, in terms of where the market is at the moment, because of all new regulation that keeps coming in and all new regulation that will keep coming in, you know, cost to serve keeps going up. So, you know, I think, you know, I guess we're probably looking at, if we could have an average portfolio size for all deals going forward to £500,000, that'd be fantastic. But realistically, something over £300,000 is still something definitely of interest. But you'd rather have, you know, quite a tight average of £300,000 rather than an average of £300,000, but the range is £1 million to 20,000, if that makes sense. I mean, for us, we're focused on family linked households.
Yep.
So, and that's really what we're looking at from an average portfolio size piece. The other thing we look at, obviously, is age.
Yeah.
But you know, you want to have a lower average age. But then I think the thing that some people don't necessarily focus on is actually how's the wealth going to cascade down. So if you take your average age, but people have done a lot of the intergenerational planning, that's what I'm far more focused on than just looking at the age in isolation. So it's, do they have the grandchildren and the children as clients for this wealth? Will it cascade down to them? And if it will, then I'm less bothered about age. I think the thing that I'm most bothered about is international clients. You know, do they have a significant volume of clients in the US? Because that's just makes a whole nightmare of new tax laws and all that sort of stuff. So that's something that we're quite bothered about. In terms of types of business, you know, SIPs, ISAs, GIAs, that's the best business to deal with because there's opportunity within it. An investment bond is an investment bond, that's fine. We don't like super esoteric stuff. We still do a lot of defined benefit transfers, but the less defined benefit transfers a firm has, obviously, the better because there's less potential liability. Same sort of thing with VCTs, EISs, BPR, etc. But I'm not so much focused on the business mix. I'd like it to have less mortgages because a mortgage doesn't, every time you do a mortgage, it doesn't contribute to more recurring income.
No.
So it doesn't turn the flywheel. It's just you know, it's initial income, and therefore it doesn't carry the same, in my view, the same value.
Well, it must be difficult to value a mortgage business a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, usually with all these firms, they've got I don't know, one or two mortgage advisors because it enables them to provide a great intergenerational planning service because you know the kids want to do a mortgage and stuff, and that's fine. But if there's a massive percentage of the business that's made up of just mortgages and it's one person, if that person left, then all that initial's gone. That just hits the EBITDA pretty much straight away. So it's just something to be cautious of, I always think.
Just going on to Consumer Duty, so we're looking about a year since it's been implemented. Have you seen a difference in terms of the market, in terms of businesses coming to you since Consumer Duty has come in?
Yes and no. With bigger regionals where we'd be potentially acquiring them as a hub business, yes. Especially businesses that are part of a network, because the network's had to implement it, like anyone that's part of Quilters or something like that. You know, they've done a good job of implementing the Consumer Duty stuff. For smaller businesses, I genuinely believe a lot of them haven't really done anything. They claim that they have, but actually when you look under the bonnet, they're still doing the same thing as they've always done. And their argument would be, but we've always looked after our clients really well. We've always given them fair value. And that isn't really what Consumer Duty is. Well, it's definitely what Consumer Duty is about. But the key thing is prove it. And a lot of them haven't bothered to prove it. They just know that they do. And fair enough, they do. It's just that isn't good enough in a larger firm. You need to demonstrate that you do. You need to prove it. And you need to, you know, in your service proposition, that needs to demonstrate. You know, if you've got 3 different tiers of service and the clients are paying exactly the same thing for each tier of service, how is that demonstrating fair value? It's not. But people don't necessarily deal with that. You know, they expect the acquirer to deal with it because they're going to come onto the acquirer's service proposition. And then there's a lot of that in the smaller end of the market. Well, I'm going to sell my business, so I'll just adopt what the acquirer does, and they'll have done all the Consumer Duty stuff anyway, so I'm fine for now. And they just fly under the radar.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. And
they've always done it.
And well, I
Not
don't
all
know.
of them.
This is
Again, there's some brilliant businesses out there for the record.
do you know what? It's one of these funny things where I think you could just have a conversation about consumer duty for a pod in itself.
Yeah.
But the thing is, though, is that I personally don't blame the small businesses for
No,
doing what they're doing,
too
because
much.
it's too much. It's a lot of work, and I think
I think that's why consolidation's happening, though, isn't it? Because basically, it's all these changes that people are insisting that these smaller businesses do. There's too much to be able to run your own business, provide a great service to clients, and have the regulatory hat on, the financial reconciliation hat on, etc. Something's got to give, and it can't be the service to the clients.
without a doubt. So the question around consumer duty, though, was has that had an impact in terms of businesses coming to the market as well? Have you seen more?
Right. Sorry, I
No,
understand.
it's fine. No, but actually,
definitely.
yeah.
Definitely, I think in terms of the number of businesses that have come to market, or maybe not so much the volume, but the common reasons that people have cited for coming to the market. One of them has definitely been consumer duty, because they felt in order to be able to achieve what the FCA wanted and mandated, it was something that they couldn't do under their existing structure because they didn't have the capacity to be able to do it all. So we've seen a lot of that, and I think that's there's been a lot of firms that have approached us of a larger size where they're not interested in retirement. I think that's probably the biggest shift since when you and I were working together, is that pretty much every deal we did was because someone was looking at retirement. It was one of those key elements. And now all the deals that I've done pretty much are people wanting to join us for the benefits of scale, and because they're finding that they're doing less and less of the stuff that they love, which is dealing with clients, and more because they've become they're a victim of their own success. They're wearing all these different hats, but none of them are actually providing value to clients. It's just admin stuff in the background. It's the Gabriel return, it's the PI renewal, it's this, it's that, it's the other, and they want to get rid of that and get back to basics.
But I think though, genuinely, there's so much pressure on the smaller business, and the other thing as well is that there is the bit that I don't like in there in particular is the proving the value of side of things, because this is just my opinion. You can tell me if you don't agree with it, but I think that the thing is, though, is that there is so much ambiguity over what is value. I mean, you could technically be charging a client 2% on an ongoing basis, but which is completely against the norm and double what most financial planners charge. But
as long as you can demonstrate fair value.
Exactly. If you can demonstrate fair value, you could technically do that. But you could get somebody on the flip side that's charging 0.25, and
we see that still.
And I just think that the thing that scares me potentially is it doesn't seem like it's almost like the free market almost. It's like you're being dictated to as to what you have to do.
Pricing.
Yeah, I think so.
I think if if you can robustly defend that you're demonstrating fair value, I think that's fine. I mean, I'm a big fan of all that. This sounds bizarre. All regulatory stuff that the FCA introduce, as being part of a bigger company, I'm a massive fan of. On the basis, I know it's not.
But is that because it's put pressure on the businesses, and then that's meant that you can?
I think you end up with a continually not everything as it's presented in the first instance is maybe the right thing or done the right way. The FCA haven't, but I think through their own admission, everything that they've implemented hasn't always gone exactly how they thought it would go. There might be some sort of other thing that happens on the back of some sort of implementation, but I'd say that every time there's a new regulatory element that's brought in, I mean, they are trying to do the right thing for clients. It might make our roles harder, etc. But I think that also it is pushing sort of consolidation, because we have the scale and the expertise internally to be able to deal with that. But I think the more that they can do this, then the more opportunity there will be for consolidation in the market, and it will be each time someone has to jump through a hoop. In terms of an IFA has to jump through a hoop, you do get more aligned businesses because people are doing stuff in a more similar way, and I think that makes for a better client experience, especially when you're acquiring the firm, because businesses are more similar. And also, if you think about the wild west of financial services, going back sort of 10 years pre-RDR, etc., the market's definitely improved in terms of the quality of client outcomes and client care. So, it's definitely an interesting space to be in.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd agree with RDR that side of things. I think it has had a positive impact on things. I do slightly worry with where they're going with it, and I think that the thing is that, as we were saying before, I think it just puts pressure on the smaller businesses, which, and as somebody that tends to deal with small to medium sized companies, I find that quite worrying in
I,
some ways.
I think they just need to. A lot of the smaller businesses that I see that have a lot of pressure on them is because they've been charging, 25 basis points, but they've been charging that for the last 30 years. And actually, if they did charge, for the service that they should be providing now, 25 basis points is too cheap. I mean, I'm not unless they've got an average client of 10 million quid or whatever. It's just sort of your general market. If your average portfolio size is £250,000, let's say, that is too cheap for a full financial planning service.
Yeah.
I think if they move from 25 basis points to 75 basis points, and that's a big hike, but it's actually still mid market in terms of the pricing out there. They'd be able to afford to bring in a couple of people to actually deal with a lot of the financial reconciliation, the consumer duty stuff, etc. And they could still offer they'd be able to offer a really good client service, but they're too cheap for what they're offering, and therefore they're getting put under a lot of pressure because they don't have the capacity and the wider team to be able to deal with the things that people are throwing at them. So
I think you're right. I mean, I always ask the question of clients how much they're charging on an ongoing basis. I like to know just for my own interest more than anything. But it's rare that I actually hear someone say that now. I mean, it's becoming rarer. 0.5 maybe. I think 0.75 is starting to become the norm more than anything. I would have thought.
I'd say most of the bigger businesses like us, they're pushing for the
Yeah,
standard rate card being 1%.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah.
But I still think your smaller regionals can charge 0.75. But I think 0.5, I think it's really difficult to run a business with everything you have to do, unless you're of significant scale and you've got you've got a smaller number of very high value clients. Very difficult to run a 0.5% charge and actually make enough money to be able to invest in the business in the proper way to carry on being able to grow.
You've led on to a nice point there, because I was going to segue. Yeah. No, I was gonna ask about the clients. When you have a look at the client base, I'm assuming that, as we were saying before, you've got those clients that are at the sweet spot.
Yep.
They've got 500,000 assets under management. You might get some that are at 250, whatever. I don't know what your minimum amount is.
£250 per annum.
Okay.
As in recurring income.
Fine. Okay.
For a family-linked household.
So that would mean that means that someone's going to have
25 grand.
Sorry?
25 grand.
25 grand. Okay,
if
fine.
If it was at 0.5%, then...
Thank you for doing the maths on that,
worries.
because I was just going,
I think cross-eyed.
Yeah. So what happens to clients that's fairly low, actually. I'm surprised by that. I was going to ask what you do with
clients. That's the benefits of scale.
So what happens with clients that maybe don't have that much money?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we'll probably have to up our minimum from £250 per annum so that's a family. If a family-linked household pays us more than £250 per annum, then we can service them. If they pay less, at the moment we have to keep them in our consultancy level of service, which is we're here if you need us, but we turn off the ongoing advisor charge. And they still get all sort of the newsletters and all those different elements through, and they can call us anytime if they want to do something with us. But ultimately, we don't feel we can charge, we can provide an ongoing service for that amount of money. We'll probably end up moving that up to £500 on the basis that we're not making money on £250, but it felt like initially a good sort of line to draw in the sand. The reason why we're able to sort of service clients at that level is because we have scale. We've been able to develop a sort of a telephonic based element to our business. It's called Connect, and I think we've got 8 financial planners that operate centrally, almost like I don't like the term, but almost like a pooled resource. Yep. So clients will go to one of those 8 financial planners, and they're not new graduates coming into the market, although there's no problem with that. They are seasoned financial planners. A couple of them are chartered. I guess, without doing any disrespect to them, they're probably more interested in looking after clients in their slippers nowadays than they are driving 100 miles to see a client. It doesn't make much sense. They're fantastic, very well qualified review advisors, and they've got a lot of support wrapped around them, so they can rack through and look after a significant number of clients. I believe they can look after about 600 clients per advisor because of the support structure they've got, because it's on Microsoft Teams. It's incredibly efficient. And also, if you think about the size of client they're dealing with, they're usually they're clients with not complex needs. There's not a lot of trusts and businesses because they're those smaller clients. So it's kind of like an ISA, a pension. It's giving them an update on what's going on, etc. Whereas our financial advisors that see people face to face probably look after about 150 to 180. So it's a big difference.
600 sounds like a lot. I mean, that's like 3 people a day, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, you can get through if you think about it. If all you're doing is you're doing the review and then you're passing it, once you've done the review, you pass it to the paraplanner, to the administrator, and all you're doing is that piece as an advisor, that piece of client contact. You've got 3 or 1 hour meetings a day, but you're not having to do all the admin and research associated with it. It's only 3 hours a day. Let's say a meeting takes 2 hours a day, 6 hours work.
Yeah,
it's completely feasible. I think, it's got a proven track record. People are happy with it. They're getting a really good service because everyone is getting reviewed.
Are these guys regulated? Are these guys?
Yeah,
they
they're
are.
regulated
Yeah.
advisors,
No,
yeah,
I just
absolutely,
thought I've heard of other businesses where they have reviewers that aren't necessarily regulated. But they're good. They're good financial planners, but they're just not regulated on the register. But yes, they are.
No, they're not financial coaches. They are fully qualified financial planners, regulated individuals. They can just, again, because I can't remember the exact things, but let's say they've got 2 administrators, 2 paraplanners per advisor. You've got a lot of resource wrapped around one person to get through a significant volume of clients, which allows you to deal with clients of a smaller size. But even still, you'd much rather they dealt with clients that are paying a minimum of £500 versus a minimum of £250 because they're doing a lot more per advisor.
What do you do with the clients that don't make it? So you've got the clients where it's 250. Let's say it's 200, less than 250.
Yeah.
Or those clients that are going to be that you might look at sort of passing on 250 to 500. What do you do with them?
Yes,
exactly?
there's sort of 3 different things, I guess. One, I have the conversation with the vendor and say, look, we've done an analysis of the client bank. We've isolated these 30 clients that pay less than £250 per annum. You've got 3 options. One, we're not going to pay for that recurring income because we're going to turn it off as soon as it comes over to Wren Sterling.
Yep.
2, you could actually offload the clients yourself. And I've got a suggestion. There's a company called, shout out to Lifetime. Lifetime, who are a business that specialises, not specialises in lower net worth clients. That's not true at all. They've got incredible tech behind them, an incredible tech stack, which means that they can deal with clients of a much lower value than we can profitably. So I'd introduce, let's say, Lifetime to the vendor and say, look, have a conversation with Lifetime about these particular clients and maybe you can pass them over to Lifetime. Nothing in it for us apart from I've given them a solution. Alternatively, they could, which is the least favoured choice, they could sack those clients. And I guess actually there's a 4th one. You could go to those clients and say, look, we're going to be doing a deal with Wren Sterling, or at the moment you're not paying us enough money, and give them the opportunity to increase the fees. So you can so instead of paying 250, actually you're 250, you're on 0.5%. We're now going to be charging 1%. And most of the time, clients don't bat an eyelid, if I'm honest, because if you think about all the other bills in the world that have gone up over the last sort of 5 years, financial planning fees probably haven't gone up. Yeah, I appreciate it's a leverage play on the stock market and it goes up in tandem with the money's increasing, but the actual fee itself, in terms of the percentage, probably hasn't gone up in the last 20 years. If someone set up a business, that no one's ever seemed to bother to change it.
So they're getting that. Yeah, I see what you mean. So then they kind of, I see what you mean.
Or you can do a combination of all 3. You go, okay, well, I've contacted these 30. 15 of them agree to up their fees, so now they're not paying less than £250. For Lifetime, these 10 work really well, and these 3 we're going to turn off.
Makes sense.
It's just give them the option, and I'll provide the solutions, and they can pick the one that's right for themselves and their clients.
Do you, with those clients then, when you're analysing the data, do you say, well, these clients, they're just simply we can't offer a multiple of EBITDA on these guys.
Yeah, yes, I'm always completely transparent with it. In my first conversations, I talk them through about the minimum, the minimum client that we can deal with. What you'll find is with most owner managed businesses, yes, they'll have a tail, but even for them, paying less than £250 per annum, there's not very many clients that fall into that bracket. It might usually it's family and friends, but there's only like 5, 6, 7, 8, especially when you're trying to buy a business with an average portfolio size of 300 plus. There aren't very many that fall into that sort of camp. So it hasn't been a problem as of yet. There might have been one or two businesses that decided not to go with us because we couldn't deal with that tail. But then from my perspective, if they've got so many clients that it makes up such a large proportion of their recurring revenue, they're really worried about it, then we're not the right business for them anyway.
Exactly. No. I think you're right there, and I think that just out of interest, what sort of size business do you need at the moment? What do you look at and say, well, do you say X amount will take on as a hub? And then
it's more about, so I mean, minimum size that we tend to actually acquire would be a business with, let's say, £300,000 of EBITDA.
Right. Okay.
There isn't really a maximum size. So I guess the maximum is it possible to integrate that business into our business, or is their brand so well established and there would just be a complete car crash of like a Lloyd's HBoss type scenario?
Yeah.
Hub wise, not the company, but if we're acquiring a hub, I tend to want it to have £1 million of EBITDA plus.
Yeah.
But the key thing is it in a place that we currently don't have a presence? Because that's when it can be a hub. Otherwise, it would just be a large spoke to an existing hub. Does it have a management team that actually can manage and grow that area? So you can have a big business, but it's just, it's two people. They look after, two advisors look after £200 million under management, and they're both looking at retiring after 4 years. Yes, it might have £1 million of profit, but that's not going to be a hub for us because it's nothing to grow from. So really the thing is it growing organically already? Do they have an appetite for acquisitions? Is there a management team in place? Does it have a director that's looking to stay on for 4 or 5 years and really excited about growing their firm with Wren Sterling? In which case that for me is a hub. And if it had £750,000 of profit, but it's got all the resource in there to be able to grow it, and there's opportunity for uplifts, etc., that that would be brilliant.
What, just on that last point that you were saying there, so do you get the scenario where some client, well, there'll be somebody that is maybe a bit younger, but they've maybe thought to themselves, oh, we kind of hit a glass ceiling here. Do you know what would be nice if we could partner up with somebody, and they sell the business? What makes because you were saying there that somebody that wants to grow, how do you, if they've sold the business, how do you entice them to try and get them to really keep going and incentivize them?
So I guess there's 4 things really. One, there's shares in Wren Sterling. So if someone will take 10 to 20% of their consideration as equity in Wren Sterling, the only reason why they're doing that is because they want to be a part of a growing firm, and they're interested in seeing Wren Sterling grow because the value of their equity will grow, and that also ties them in until our next refinancing opportunity. So that's key. The other thing is that it's our 3 valuation creation levers. So there's one about organic growth, so increasing recurring income. So the more recurring income they write, the more it grows, the bigger the capital payment at the end of usually a 3-year period that will give them. There's one about moving money over to the DFM. Again, it's not mandatory, but if they do that, that's going to grow the firm, because it's going to grow the profit line because the DFM will bring us profit. And also there's an opportunity to, I say, uplift the ongoing advisor fees, which again is growing the recurring income line, if that makes sense. So I think that there's those key elements that we put in. There's also varying bespoke elements that I can put into a deal that will incentivize people to take it one step further, but that's more sort of deal specific and something that I'll potentially design specifically for a firm, like for example an AUM bonus based on growth of net assets or something like that. There's various things that we can put in, but they're sort of the top 4 things that keep people engaged long term, because all those valuation creation kickers pay out at sort of the end of year 3. So
Right,
that means
okay.
you've got continued engagement for at least that 3-year period. And then what we've found is that if we provide people with a really good environment, then actually I think 4 or 5 of the deals now, they've reached the end of their deferred consideration. There were people that were originally saying that they were going to actually exit, but they've all decided to roll on as employees of Wren Sterling and carry on looking after clients, which is probably the biggest thumbs up to us as a firm, that we're doing the right things and, you know, and doing the right thing and the thing right. But they're just, you've got, if you can I guess align interests. Also, what you've got to do is make sure that the environment is something that people would actually really like to work in. Because if you kill them with red tape, if you take on these directors and you give them a target of, you know, X amount of new business, and you hit them with a stick and stuff, they're not going to stay. So to keep them engaged, you also want to let them carry on running the business in the way that they've been running it. What I mean by that is, specifically, if they've always taken every Thursday off to play golf and they run their business for 3 months of the year from Portugal, they carry on doing that, and that tends to keep engagement and people still geared up to plough forwards.
So is that autonomy side of things then? When you say acquire one of these hubs, do they, to some extent, I know that you have some places where, as you were saying, there is a red line, you will not cross it, but is there a degree of autonomy there?
Yeah. So if you're acquiring a hub, what you're trying to acquire is a management team. So we tend to take over the operational side of things, so that their ops teams will feed into our, you know, the wider Wren Sterling operations business. But then you tend to want them to be able to carry on pushing the sales team, if you like, the IFA team, the financial planning team. So they have to follow our operational processes and procedures. But one of the greatest things about acquiring firms is that you have the opportunity to improve your DNA, if you like. So a lot of our best innovations haven't actually been our innovations at all. They've been, you know, opportunities or things that we've spotted in firms that we've acquired, which we've then applied to the rest of the group, because there tends to be, you know, there's more than one way of doing things, but there tends to be better ways of doing things, and we keep trying to improve that.
Is there an example that you can?
Yeah. So if you take one of the bigger deals we did was a company called Mutual over in the Northwest, and we ultimately changed the way in which we charge clients. So we used to have, I guess because of our roots, and we came from, we needed lots of controls over the businesses in the first instance when we acquired it, because, you know, when we acquired the Towergate Financial Planning Group, or the financial planning element of that group, we needed to put in some sort of more governance, etc. And we've sort of really tightened down because the business wasn't making money at that point in time. So we had a way in which we charged clients, where you basically agreed the fee that you were going to pay, that the client was going to pay up front before you did any of the work. And when we acquired Mutual, they said, well, we've got a lot of high net worth clients, and actually you want to demonstrate the value to the client before you agree what the fee is. You want to demonstrate to them that you've done a chunk of work and give them some of the value, so that they'll then agree to pay a decent fee. So we actually implemented that across the group, which is quite a seismic shift if you think about it. It doesn't sound big, but it is actually quite a big thing in terms of clients' perception.
So if I got this right then, so Mutual were doing it whereby they would essentially do a lot of the work before anything was agreed.
Yeah. So I think you I mean, I probably don't know the ins and outs enough, but ultimately our thing previously was, right, before we do anything, it's going to be 20 grand or whatever. And the client would go, well, hang on a second, I don't even know what you're going to, you know, I'm not that interested. I think because we were also trying to bring ourselves up market. So for clients that we tended to be dealing with, which was maybe through the building society connections that we had, clients who had sort of smaller pots, quite easy to agree a fee up front and then go and do the work. For clients where they've got 3 businesses, 2 trusts, whole family, etc., to say, look, before we do anything, before we give you any value, before we do sort of a bit of a analysis of your assets and show you what value we can bring, you'll need to pay us 50 grand. That's a very different conversation. I think probably another example is when we acquired Critchley's, run by Jason McGuigan, who's absolutely brilliant. All the Mutual guys are brilliant, by the way. But when we acquired Critchley's, one thing that they bought was like sort of how to do a better sort of fact find and how to do a better cash flow modelling piece with the clients. And again, we sort of shamelessly have implemented that across the business. I guess one of the other things from the acquisitions is that we've promoted from within. So one of the managing directors of Mutual is now our director of financial planning. Gaz over there is now sort of regional director for the north. Jason McGuigan, who came from Critchley's, is regional director for the south. you know, one of the greatest things about the acquisition opportunity is it's also a recruitment opportunity. You get to recruit the people that aren't the best of the unhappy or the unemployed, but they're people that are running a really successful business. And they're often some of the best people you can possibly bring in to kind of keep improving that DNA. So as much as it's ideas, it's also improving the people in the business as well, which has been really key.
The final thing that I wanted to touch on was just to really get your knowledge. Let's just say, for instance, that you're an IFA firm. You're looking to go out there to the market and trying to acquire businesses. I'm not saying somebody that's sort of, not PE backed, anything like that. But what would you do to try and make yourself kind of sexy, if you like, to sellers?
It's a good question. I think speaking with a number of different brokers in the market to ask them the question of, from their experience and all the clients that they're working with, what are the top 3 things that they think could really differentiate a firm? Because they're always dealing with new acquirers coming to the marketplace. They always know what the hot topic is, etc. I think make sure you've got the right people dealing with the acquisition. So if you're sort of let's say a regional firm, make sure you have involvement from, the CEO, and make sure you're dedicating some serious C-suite time to it, and you're going to see people face to face to have those conversations. You invite them to your office. You take a bit of time to do things properly and get to know them. I think the best way to be successful as a smaller business is to play the people card and play it better than any of the consolidators can, by really wrapping your arms around people, because you're probably not going to be able to compete on price necessarily. You don't have as much firepower, and you're not going to be able to compete on resource or integration, etc. Because we're always going to have more people and more resource. So I think you've got to just go for the wine and dine approach, and make sure you prepare a deck on your firm. So you sit down with all your C-suite people and you go through, what are the best things about your firm, what makes you different, and be true to yourself. Don't try and be flexible in these conversations, but not flimsy. So if you know what you are and where you're trying to get to, I think just properly laying that on the table, but with some flex, so that people see you have a clear strategy, you've got a clear plan, and they know what you're all about. Because I think if a lot of people that come to the market as a first-time acquirer try to just cater for the vendor's needs, but the vendor doesn't actually necessarily, their needs change as they go through the conversation. They don't necessarily know what they don't know in terms of what they want might be what they want based on their knowledge set at that particular time. So I think being really clear on what you can offer, and probably to make yourself sexy, if you can pay more up front than most, because you're not governed by leverage calculations, but actually you've got the cash in the bank and it's from cash flow, that would be a sexy thing. Maybe doing a price adjustment mechanic that's different to the rest of the market, because you're so confident in the client bank of the firm that you don't have to put such restrictions on it. That sort of stuff, that can be quite attractive. But I think you'll always win it on people, and really just knowing your business inside out and being able to demonstrate where you're heading. I think that's the key stuff.
I'd agree. I think that the people side of it is really important. I think, as you said, I think to a degree being a little bit flexible with things. And I think the only thing that I would add into that is that I think that, as you were saying beforehand, I think continuity is really important.
Oh yeah, massively so, yeah.
And I think that's one aspect where you've probably got a little bit of flexibility, more so than other businesses. So use it to your advantage, the fact that you're a bit more nimble, rather than somebody that's got a set process for doing things.
It's play to your strengths, isn't it? Because I think most of the consolidators, pretty much all of them, have got some level of vertical integration, which is something that's difficult to achieve when you're sort of a regional firm. So don't try and compete on that basis. Just almost do the complete opposite, which is we don't have any vertical integration. We're not going to have any revenue synergies from this, but what we can keep is absolute continuity for you and your business. And I also think be very selective, and just when you find one that's pretty much a good fit for the business, just go for that one. Don't try and play too many off. at the same time, really just push the boat out on valuation, push it as much as you can, because there's, you just go for the one that's the right fit. I think a few people that I used to deal with, they'd be looking at 5 or 6 at the same time, knowing they could only do one. But because they're looking at 5 and 6, they're putting sort of mediocre offers out. And actually, you're better off snaffling the one that's a great fit, that's a great business where you get on with them, and just maybe even slightly overpaying. Because if you're going to run it for the next 10 years, it'll massively pay for itself.
It's an interesting one, that, because I would almost... I think the thing is that if I can take anything from when I was at Bradbury Hamilton, it was that you'd make a few offers to people, and it would sometimes take a lot of time.
Yeah.
For people to come back. As you know, it's one of these things where selling's obviously a very big deal to people, and it can just take a huge amount of time for someone to make that decision. So the thing is that, and I guess that the only issue is does it hold you back slightly if you don't go and say, I see what you're saying about putting your eggs in one basket. I'm thinking to myself that if you don't put yourself out there and spread yourself thin a little bit, then the reality is, out of those 5, let's say, that you had, how many of those are actually going to come on board? Probably.
Well, I guess my thing was, if you're a regional business, you're probably only looking to do 1 or 2 a year anyway.
Yeah, that's right.
So I just think instead of putting mediocre offers out on 5, pick your top 2 and just put a killer offer down where you go, you feel like you're almost overpaying, as long as you're not overpaying, and overpaying is completely subjective anyway.
Yeah.
But think about the long-term value from it. Think about the referrals. Think about that sort of stuff, and just really push the boat out rather than just trying to get yourself a good deal. Because you're unlikely to be able to get yourself a good deal in this market, especially if you don't have the know-how to what a good deal is. You'll probably just end up lowballing people, hacking people off. Then you don't get any more intros.
It's a tough one, that. I mean, it's all. I think the thing is that if you're in it for the long haul, I'd probably say that acquisitions is a good way to go. Yeah. I mean, but it's got to be done over a long period of time. And I think you've got to soak up those costs initially, and it might. Yeah, I'm not sure. But great conversation with Henry Blunt today, the acquisitions director at Wren Sterling. So we went into quite a bit of detail in a lot of topics I wasn't expecting to go into, including consumer duty. But the main thing that was really great that we got from him is what to do to get your business ready for sale, and what to do if you're looking to acquire businesses as well. Lots of great stuff there from somebody that has done this, has acquired 23 businesses over the course of the last 2.5 years. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did like the podcast, just put a little share. Go and say, oh, Jamie Bradbury's podcast is really good. We haven't actually come up with a name yet, but there you go. All right. See you later. Bye.